So maybe you've seen I'm not wearing any shoes, and I'll explain to you in a bit why this is beneficial. I'm not only a philosopher, I'm also a journalist. And a year ago, I was still sitting indoors behind my laptop every day. I had a lot of stress. My favorite deadline diet consisted of cookies. And I always had this huge feeling of tiredness all afternoon, like a huge brain fog. And at some point, I started to get this pain in my wrists. I tried to solve these problems by getting a better chair, buying a fancy mouse, and even tried switching to healthy cookies. But it didn't help. And looking back, this was because I was trying to find a solution within my usual frame of thought, which is to merely add new products in order to solve something. And then one day, I met a friend who had gotten rid of her brain fog and her sleeping problems by switching to the paleo diet. And this paleo diet is based on the diet of our ancestors, our early ancestors. And it simply leaves out all refined sugar, all processed food, all grains and dairy. Being Dutch, leaving out bread and cheese seemed like a small crime to me. But I thought, okay, I want to try that. I want to see what happens. So I switched to the paleo diet. I started eating according to the paleo diet. And after a couple of weeks, I noticed I didn't have this brain fog anymore. And after half a year, I realized I had not had any cold or flu at all. And after a year, my doctor said that my cholesterol levels were the best he had ever seen in his 30 years of practice. So this made me curious about the other habits of our early ancestors. What would happen if I would try those? Could I leave out more stuff and benefit from this? I decided to do quite a radical experiment. I decided to try as many habits as possible of early Homo sapiens of 40,000 years ago. Not for a week, but for a whole year. And not somewhere in some remote nature, but right in the middle of Amsterdam, where I live. I didn't want to go back to nature, I left my clothes on, but I did want to learn from a different perspective. I invited a paleo expert to give me advice on everything, and I did a lot of medical tests before I started, and I will do those again at the end of my experiment. So I'd like to share with you some of the results. I started half a year ago, and I left out all contemporary care products like shampoo. Initially, my hair got greasy, and I really wanted to wash it. But after a couple of weeks, I noticed that my scalp just seemed to recover itself, and my hair looks completely normal now. I also left out all contemporary transport in Amsterdam. Early Homo sapiens females walked 9 kilometers a day on average. And by doing that, I improved my stamina. I noticed it's really good for my mood. And I even cured my vitamin D deficiency by being outdoors more. I also left out cutlery. So I eat with my hands. And just like maybe, smelling adds a lot to your eating experience, so does adding this extra sense organ. And I feel like I have more contact with my food now. I also left out makeup, and I'm still being asked on dates. There's no Mr. Caveman yet, so any candidates can send me smoke signals. Thanks. And I left out my fancy chair. I've got a standing desk now, and I hardly have any pain in my wrists anymore. One big stretch, I left out toilet paper. I use water now, because I calculated we use 150 trees in our lives for wiping ourselves with paper. So I use water now, you only need a little bit. It's actually very clean, and I saved 2 trees so far by doing that. I almost forgot to tell you about my bare feet. I left out my shoes. And this was actually the most amazing experience, the most amazing result. Because, imagine that you would have worn oven mitts all your life. And that finally one day you'd be able to take them off and feel everything. That's what it was like for me to be barefoot, or that's what it is like for me to be barefoot all the time. I not only hear my city and not only see my city, but I also can feel it. And I feel like I'm much closer and appreciate my city more. And my feet were quite weak from being in shoes over 30 years, but they got a lot stronger. And I learned how to land on my forefoot, which you can't really do in regular shoes, but this is how we used to walk. And it puts a lot less pressure on your legs and knees. So, yeah, and a lot of people think it's very dangerous, of course, to walk barefoot, but actually the worst thing that happened to me in this last 6 months is that I got very sticky from stepping into ice cream. So, yeah. And not everything is great. There's one thing that I don't like. Of course, I'm not shaving my legs. And I think I'm too much of a modern woman to appreciate, you know, some sort of a force there. So I'm not going to keep doing that after the year. So what I do is a little radical. But I believe everyone can have their own small experiment in seeing what you can do without. And I would like actually to challenge you to leave out one product for 1 week and see how it works for you. For example, leave out cutlery for 1 week and see if you experience your food differently, or leave out refined sugar for 1 week and see if it leaves you feeling more energized. Because, yeah, that's one thing I learned from this experiment, that we need to expand our concept of innovation. Instead of always adding new products in order to solve something, you can also leave out things, and that's one thing I learned. And what I find important about experimenting is that it helps you to challenge the framework from which a problem occurred, and so leads to new solutions. So my experiment hasn't ended yet, and I hope that before it does, many of you will have started one for yourselves.